Having greetings, everyone, from Cedino Mission House in Berkeley. I'm Father Joe Nazel. You know, the readings for the third Sunday of Advent speak of joy and hope and rejoicing and gladness. It's traditionally called Gaudete Sunday. And there's a wonderful image at the conclusion of the first reading for the prophet Zephaniah's Song of Joy, where he says, God will renew you in his love, and God will sing joyfully because of you. Imagine God singing joyfully when God is thinking about us. That's not the God many of us grew up with, you know. Many of us grew up with a God who would rather scold than sing, frown than fawn over us, condemn rather than congratulate us. The image that comes to me is like meeting an old friend after you haven't seen him for a long time, and you spend all afternoon or evening together. You talk about old times. There's a lot of laughter as you tell all these great stories. And when you move on, take leave of one another, as you walk away, you begin whistling or humming or singing because you're filled with so much joy that you reconnected with this old friend, that you feel renewed, reinvigorated, rekindled. Life isn't as bad as you thought. There's a friend here who remembers. A sense of connection is restored. Paul picks up this theme in the second reading where he says, rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again, rejoice. It's not good enough to say once. Paul has to say it twice. Why is Paul so joyful? Maybe because the people of Philippi, which I think is his favorite parish, is taking to heart the message of Jesus. Your kindness should be known to all, he says. The Lord is near. But he says that it's not like that old warning, the Lord is near, you better look busy. This is a God who loves us so much. You have no anxiety at all. Paul encourages the people to pray with grateful hearts, and then the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ. You know, I saw a blog post recently in which the writer was experiencing a time of deep gloom and despair in her life. She imagined it as a deep void. And so she shouted into the void, what is the purpose of my life? And she imagined hearing a voice that said, what if I told you that you fulfilled it when you took an extra hour to talk and listen to that kid about his life? Or when you paid that young couple's bill at the restaurant? Or when you saved that dog in traffic? Or when you tied your father's shoes? The voice continued, your problem is you equate your purpose in life with some kind of achievement. God isn't interested in your achievements. God is interested in your heart. And when you choose to act out of kindness, compassion, love, you're already aligned with your true purpose. There's no need to look any further. And that really echoes what we hear in the gospel when the disciples of John ask him, what should we do? And John answers in very practical terms that all have to do with looking out for one another, especially those who are most in need. Whoever has two cloaks, John says, should share one who has none. And whoever has food should do likewise. John's answer is to be generous, not greedy, to seek to meet the needs of others before we seek to fulfill our own wants or needs. You know, in today's world, the other, whoever we deem that person to be, whether it's the immigrant or the refugee or the unemployed or the vaccinated or the rich or the poor or the liberal or the conservative or the progressive or the traditionalist, is often the other is disdained by those who view the world through a different lens. And this has led to, as we all know, profound polarization and a division that frankly drains the joy and hope of this Advent season right out from under us. But maybe the prophet John the Baptist, who I often imagine, not as a joyful person, but rather as an old curmudgeon, not as a charismatic, compassionate presence, but someone who's calling fire and brimstone upon you. And yet in today's gospel, he offers some very practical advice on how to bridge that deep divide. Because the gospel says even the tax collectors came to be baptized and asked John's advice. The tax collectors were definitely the others. They had extorted and betrayed their own people to pad their own pockets as they sold out to the Roman occupation. To these others, John says, Simply, do not practice extortion. Do not falsely accuse anyone. Be satisfied with your wages. This is practical advice. Being prophetic is not always about being practical. Maybe that's where we continue to make our mistake. We think too often in the big picture, and we miss the small brushstrokes of kindness and compassion that bind us together. So what should we do? It's a timeless question, but really it goes back to the basics, doesn't it? Love one another. Do the little things, the small acts of kindness that go unnoticed but not unneeded. Help one another. Be merciful. Be compassionate. Be less judgmental. Be more inclusive. Listen to one another. And don't be discouraged. Indeed, the best way to prepare for Christmas is to be kind. That's it. Be kind to one another. And then Paul's fervent prayer might be realized. Your kindness shall be known by all. Have a blessed week. Take good care as we continue to meet in prayer.